Good morning, church family. Welcome to the Daily Word. It is October the 15th, and we are in 1 Timothy chapter 3, coming off the heels of a pretty in-depth look at 1 Timothy chapter 2, and then the deductive reasons and arguments surrounding why it is biblical for men to hold the position of pastor or elder and teach in authority over the entire church, and it is unbiblical or not the biblical framework for a woman to teach and exercise authority over the church. Paul makes that clear. If you missed that, go back, watch yesterday, and then today will make a little more sense. What I want to do is look at the qualifications of an elder or pastor today. The terms are used interchangeably throughout the New Testament. I won't get overly technical, but you have episkopos and presbyteros and the poimen, the shepherd, the pastor, all used interchangeably in some ways. And so there are some who would argue differently and say that, pastors and elders are two different things and that there's this and that and the other, but that's really not a helpful argument for us to deal with here and now and not really relevant. What Paul makes clear is that there are going to be qualifications and that pastors or elders must have these evident habitually in their life. Of course, we know that even the best of men are still men at best. We're all going to sin. I sin, you sin, we all sin. However, the habitual patterns in a man's life will be evident as these things. And what Paul does is lay down about 17 qualifications in addition to what we've counted up to be about 42 functions of a pastor or an elder, or characteristics, things that might be synonymous with recognizing error and preaching the word and being gracious and gentle with people and calling out false teachers or appointing only qualified men to lead in the church or to rightly divide the word or to flee youthful lusts. All of those things are throughout 1 and 2 Timothy. But here and now, I want to look at the 17 qualifications or so of the pastor elder. The first one is aspiration. We see that it is a trustworthy statement. If any man aspires, in verse 1, to the office of overseer, it's a fine work he desires to do. The first thing that a man should have is an aspiration. Nobody should be arm twisting somebody into ministry or into leadership. We don't go chase somebody down and go, man, please be an elder, please lead our church, please be a pastor. No. That man will have an internal desire. Sometimes he will be humble and quiet about it, but of course, in the process of that, he won't be shy about his desire in the sense of he's not putting himself in the position and saying, I'm going to make myself a pastor. But yet if someone were to say, do you want to be a pastor? Do you want to be an elder? He would say, with all my heart, I aspire to do that. The second qualification is that man be above reproach. This term means not able to be held to something, or in the picture sense, if you ever think of a slot machine with a handle, this is the idea of not really having a handle to pull. I don't have the ability to look at this man's life or his character or his past and present and find something that over and over I can pull the handle on. He's been through repeated marriages, or he keeps stealing money, or he doesn't really do the right thing and follow what God's word says in the sense of his leadership and what he's doing over and over and over. There are handles to pull in this man's life, and we could look back at patterns that have not been repented of and aren't pre-conversion, and he's just a constant streak of a mess and poor leadership. Now, does that guy get kicked out of the church? Is he not a Christian? No, that's not at all what Paul's saying. It's that he would not necessarily be qualified for the role of pastor elder. He needs to grow in godliness because, again, we all sin. But there's no private, public, sexual, financial, or addictive failure that somebody could say, hey, I'm seeing that in this guy's life over and over and over. Third, he needs to be the husband of one wife. Paul says that very clearly. Not the wife of one husband. This is to be, in the Greek language, a one-woman man. That's the expression here. He's not a man who has mistresses. He's not a man who actively cheats on his spouse and has another woman. He's not a man post-conversion that has a clear storyline of adultery as a believer. Again, some people make that mistake. They sin in that way. They repent. They're restored. But someone who's in that position is not to be a pastor elder in that sense. The question often comes up, well, if I've been divorced before I was saved, could I be an elder in the church? The answer, as far as I would say and our church would say theologically, is of course. Everything pre-conversion is pre-Christ. You are of the world, you are a son of disobedience, and not everyone would like that position. They'll say, no, divorced people can't be. A divorced man cannot be a pastor elder. There is zero textual evidence that would say that a man pre-conversion is going to be held to that same standard post-conversion. No, what is before the cross is before the cross. And how many of you know, and I thank God for this in my own life, that what has been after the cross is after the cross. And so we want to be clear, these are after conversion. He loves his wife and is a one-woman man. Temperate, this word means without wine or unmixed with wine. It sort of metaphorically is referencing an alert, a watchful individual. He's vigilant. He thinks clearly. He's unrestricted by mental or emotional turmoil. This man is not crazy in the head. You're not wondering, what's he going to do? I don't know what he's going to say or think. Temperate. Prudent, a word that is essentially not being a clown or a fool with your decision making, with your language, with the way that you maintain your disciplines in spiritual things. Prudent is, of course, all over the book of Proverbs. It's one who's not distracted by silly things. This would be kind of the joke sometimes where people would say, what do pastors do all day? What do you sit around and hang out, have meetings and eat donuts and then go play some golf? I mean, what does a pastor even do? Then download a sermon, print it up and go in the pulpit and give a TED talk? Pastoring must be easy. No, we're not to be silly men who take advantage of free time and just kind of hang out. We're to be hardworking, prudent men focused on the task at hand. We are to be respectable. This is somebody who's orderly in their behavior. They are known as somebody who leads a well-disciplined life. You could even say a man who is timely, orderly, organized. He's strategic. He lives a life that you'd say, if he was in charge of my finances as my financial advisor, or if that man was my dad, or he was in charge of my life would have order to it. This would be a respectable man to follow. Hospitable, another word, literally somebody who loves strangers. Okay, hospitable doesn't mean you have everyone over in the church all the time and you eat pizza with them and hang out and put your feet up on their couch. That certainly is a fun thing and we enjoy the fellowship. But it is a love for strangers. It's those who are lonely, those who are outside the fold even, those who are passing through or need some fellowship or need some help. You ever wonder why pastors are usually the guys going around the campus sometimes going, hey, and they're introducing people. They're trying to pass people off to new friendships and relationships. That's part of hospitality as well. Think of John, Pastor John, every Sunday or so will say, don't forget, members, you are all on the welcome team. That would be a quintessential example of a man who is openly loving strangers. Able to teach, certainly an elder must be able to handle the scriptures. He can't look and say, I don't know what to do here or even how to formulate this. He would look and say, I know how to mine the scriptures and to present these truths and feed the people of God. Not addicted to wine is another one that is laid out in this chapter, and that means that this man does not have a reputation as a drinker. He's not somebody that you see who always has a drink in his hand. If you spend time at his house, the first thing he doesn't do is crack a beer and throw one to you and say, hey, let's have a few drinks and hang out. He's not casual with his drinking. This is somebody who's not addicted to much wine. He's not consistently enjoying alcohol and causing people to stumble who have a weaker conscience. And you know what? Some people don't like that. I know in the Reformed world, everybody tends to like to, smoke a cigar and have a beer and, whatever. There's Christian liberties there. And the Bible says that we aren't to be drunk. But our church leaders are not to be known as drinkers, as men who are consistently throwing a few back and having a good time. That's not considered cool or normal or relevant or relatable. That's ill-advised and something that we need to be very careful with. Again, not that it's a sin to drink, but it is certainly unwise and not prudent and not temperate and not respectable for a pastor to be the guy you always know who's having a cold one. Also, not pugnacious. The word literally means not a giver of blows, not a guy who throws the fist. He's not looking to always fight and get in fist fights and settling disputes with violence. He's to be gentle. This is a man who's considerate. He's genial, forbearing. He's gracious. When he's sinned against, he forgives. This is somebody who doesn't have, a long laundry list of bitter grudges. He's not looking to get everybody back in his life. Uncontentious is another one we see in this passage in 1 Timothy chapter 3. This is somebody who's peaceful. He's not quarrelsome. He's not always looking for a fight. He wants to promote unity and promote peace, even if it means sometimes disagreeing agreeably. He doesn't want to see a big war. Not a lover of money. Okay, that's pretty easy. He's not obsessed with making big time money. His goal is not to get rich. He knows that the root of all evil is the love of money, and that false teachers are indicative of that type of love. And so he has a record of generosity, hard work, and the stewardship of his finances in a proper sense. He manages his household well. Number 14. This literally means to preside over his household and each part of it in some sense, and that his home is in order. He manages his wife. He manages his time. He manages the direction and the vision of his home. His home isn't thinking, man, I really don't know who's in charge here. I don't really know what the future holds. Or, I don't really know my dad that well. Or we don't have a close relationship. I'm not really sure if there's a lot of stability here. That would be poor household management. 15, children under control with dignity means in the original language that they line up under his authority. It's a military term. That means basically, even if not all the kids agree with everything that's always done or necessarily like it, they know that obedience is not optional in the home. They say, we're going to obey Dad. We're going to follow our father and our mother. We may not always agree. This doesn't guarantee that every child is a believer and that they're all going to be superstar Christians. No, but it does mean that they understand moral authority, the ability to line up under authority. One day when those children grow up and end up at a job, they don't really have a lot of issues with the boss because they know I had a boss when I was young, mom and dad. Now I have a boss. It's the guy who's my CEO or the CFO or COO. And so children who don't have a real issue with being under control in obedience. Of course, when they're young, they need to be taught that. But as they grow, we should see it in our own homes and lives, and you should see it in a church leader's home. Another one, not a new convert. This isn't somebody who has been thrown into a leadership position early because of influence or money or even ability. They are somebody who has great character. They've been watched. The time has done the heavy lifting, and it is proven to be a faithful individual. They say truth and time go hand in hand. And that's this individual. They are tempered for leadership. They've been tested, and now they can be trusted. They're not a new convert. And then finally, a good reputation outside the church. This original word comes from the word that we get martyr, basically somebody who has a certified testimony. They're known in the community. They have a good reputation. People would say, hey, I don't agree with him, but I respect him. Or I don't necessarily like the things that he always teaches, and I wouldn't go there. I wouldn't push that far. Or I'm not a big fan of the way that he does everything. But hey, I know where he stands. He's respectable. He might have some healthy disagreement in the community with other religions or even other positions of faith. There might be some people in the church that have a difficult time with his personality or his style. Maybe he's a little too hyper for them, or maybe he's a little too mellow or calm for them, or passive, what have you. But overall, they'll say, yeah, but none of that's sin. This is a man of good reputation. This is a man of godliness. And I would certainly follow that individual. And so those are the qualifications that Paul lays out here. He goes on to explain that deacons have to be men of dignity as well, those who serve alongside the elders. They're not double-tongued, so they're not talking out the sides of their mouth. There's not a lot of deception in their life, and they're not addicted to much wine. So there it is again. And by the way, probably most likely for the references over and over to alcohol in the New Testament epistles about certain levels of leadership is this. Proverbs actually says this about wine or drink. Strong drink is a brawler. There at the end of Proverbs 30 and Proverbs 31, the advice is for a king not to really be drunk a lot or to be a big drinker, because in the end, strong alcohol and strong addictions to alcohol will impair judgment. And how many of you know we need our pastors, our elders, our deacons, our church leaders to be clear-minded? We don't want them to have issues with sobriety. We need them to be mature, stable, strong warriors, because the war on truth is a serious thing, and there are casualties. The deacons are not outside of that accountability as well. And then they can't be fond of sordid gain. And they have to be holding to the mystery of faith with a clear conscience. Of course, that would be because a lot of deacons help to manage stewardship in the church. Maybe it's finances or other things. But overall, church leaders have a high bar. So the simple takeaway today in all of that is, number one, I hope that you have a greater understanding of the high call for a pastor elder. But two, I hope that you would be committed to praying for your pastors and your elders and the deacons at the church. Because there is a high call and a high bar, and there is an enemy who constantly wages war against the character of these men. And so keep us in prayer. If you're from another church, you happen to see this, keep your pastors and your elders and your deacons in prayer. And I hope, again, that you have a greater understanding of God's high call for church leaders. Love you, and we'll see you tomorrow as we jump into 1 Timothy chapter 4.